Welcome, everyone, to episode 140 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, punch-drunk idiot Jared Hornbeck, a flesh bag that can't stop screaming, and I'm coming to you, as always, from Brooklyn, New York. But, luckily for me, my best pal is on this call, so who else is here with me?
Well, I got vocal cords and I know how to use them. It's me, Steve Guntley, and this is the podcast about pigmen, seminal fluid chambers, and of course, superimposed nightmare factories of death. That's because this is the podcast about Dr. Moreau's House of Pain, a very loose, very Charles Bandy adaptation of H.G. Wells's classic horror story. Like, I guess kind of a sequel in ways, but also like just sort of a reboot, remake, kind of, reinterpretation of that classic property. It's a wild time with a couple of very weird things about it. And this is part 2 of our month of Noirvember, the month where we are watching all of the movies that we're covering in the black and white noir format and deciding whether or not it suits the project at all. And we are excited to be joined by a special guest who is joining us here today, Jared.
Well, thank you. I thought you would never ask.
I almost didn't.
To come in and you almost didn't. To tackle, such a feat as to watch all of these noir movies, especially from the shadow era of Full Moon here, we had to bring in someone who is a film enthusiast because obviously you want someone with that kind of energy to talk about this. It is Austin-based actor Brennan Patrick. Brennan, thank you so much for joining us. Excited to have you here and talk about this weird little movie with us.
Thank you for having me. And I'm your best friend, right? That you mentioned at the top of the show. I'm the one that you were mentioning, right?
I sense that you guys had hit it off like pretty quickly. Yeah. Despite the camera not even being on, Yes, Brennan is here. We're very excited to have you. This was a fun time for me because I think this is the only time I've gotten to watch one of the movies in the same room with one of our guests, which was really fun. So I appreciate you coming and hanging out and watching this deeply weird film that we're going to be getting all into. Before we get into all of that, I'm just curious a little bit if you could tell us about some of your experiences with Full Moon, with horror in general. I can tell people already you were conscripted into this one. This was not one that you were necessarily chomping at the bit to get to, but I dragged you in kicking and screaming. But what is your kind of background with B-movie horror?
When I looked at the list of Full Moon pictures that y'all had already covered, I mean, you had long covered the small handful of films that I was familiar with,
Right.
So there was no chance that I was going to be not dragged kicking and screaming into whatever you presented me with. Because I think the only Charles Band directed movie I've seen is Head of the Family.
Which just 2 weeks ago we aired that one,
I found that a very distinctive experience. I feel like this has been said about him before, but it felt very like Tennessee Williams, sort of like a hot house Southern Gothic melodrama, but with a giant head in a wheelchair. So that was bracing for me. As far as like B horror in general goes, I mean, I've been a fan since high school. I noticed your Reanimator shirt, Jared. Stuart Gordon is probably
thank you.
Of the big guys in that regard. I mean, if we've entered the naming some guys portion of the program,
gotta name some guys.
That's literally all we do on this show.
Who are you guys? We're the first podcast to have a "Who Are Your Guys" segment, so I'm excited to be talking about
that. Stuart Gordon for sure. Frank Henenlotter is another one, Basket Case, Brain Damage, and Frankenhooker.
The big three. I love all of those.
Yeah, and then Larry Cohen probably also. Those are like my top three of this era.
We're very much doing a Who Are Your Guys segment right now, which is like what 90% of male podcasting is. But I love the fact that you brought up Larry Cohen because recently I was at Brooklyn Horror Film Festival and in the Nighthawk Theater where they were exclusively doing the film festival stuff. When you first walk into the main larger theater, there is like a, for lack of a better 2025 term, like handicap seat, I guess, handy capable seat right on your left when you first walk in. And for the entire duration of the festival, every single thing that I saw and probably a lot of other things that I didn't see that seat was just reserved for William Lustig. And he just literally sat there the entire time. And he is an incredibly friendly dude. Like I've had many conversations with him before. He's an absolute delight. Unfortunately, Larry Cohen is no longer with us, but I always think of the two of them in the same breath. And then I find that I always, when I'm talking about Larry Cohen, it's almost exclusively in saying how he is not appreciated the way that he should be appreciated. Because to me, like, the It's Alive and the some of those earlier movies that he did are incredible, but like the run of like the Hugh the Winged Serpent and The Stuff and writing Maniac Cop and a bunch of the Ambulance, I believe, was his too, with Eric Roberts. Is a really fun movie. He has such a weird, singular, like, New York filmography that he's somebody I love, and he's a name that isn't often named in the Who's Your Guy section. So I appreciate you bringing him up.
I'm actually a little surprised that it's taken us this long to drop his name on the show. Like, I don't think he's come up before, but I know you and I are both like huge fans, and for whatever reason, there just hasn't been much crossover. But yeah, Larry Cohen was kind of, I don't know. Yeah, one of those auteur. Yes. Oh my God, you got the Stuff Blu-ray, of course. Like, I swear to God, like Jared's desk is just like Ramona Flowers' purse. Like anytime he needs something, he just reaches into it and it's there. It's just like, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. But so you didn't really have too much exposure to Full Moon prior to this, really?
No, Charles Band and Full Moon was one of the guys that I didn't know. I'm not sure why I'd never gotten around to exploring his filmography, because I went through like a big phase of like digging into this whole era. I mean, he's worked. What did you say his most recent picture was, like in 2022? So it's not like he's only relegated.
Yeah, he's
80s and 90s. Constantly. But I feel like that's where he got his start, and that's where a lot of these like more iconic, for our generation at least, B horror guys came up. So I'd never really gotten around to him. I guess in general, what I appreciate about these kind of movies is the gap between the ambition and the technical execution and budget, and that gap is often filled by raw passion and willpower and ego.
Yeah.
I just think that produces a lot of the most interesting movies, honestly. Ones where it's like, no one was asking for this to exist, but this guy and this group of people like made it happen through sheer passion and force of will. And so sometimes like seeing the strings in a lot of these like, cheapy horror movies is in a way like more thrilling and can be scarier and more satisfying than something that's a lot more slick and highly produced. I'm a local community actor and a wannabe filmmaker. And so like a lot of these guys are more inspiring to me than the big head honchos. Because there's a making a movie in the backyard with your friends quality that feels very like tangible and reachable for me. So that's where a lot of my enjoyment of these movies comes from.
Yeah.
That's really well put. And actually that makes me think of my attitude towards this movie in particular. So I think it's pretty apt that you said that now, because, and you put that very eloquently. I was maybe not going to articulate it quite as well as you did, but the feeling behind what you just said was what I took with me in watching this movie, where like a lot of the other movies we watched, I was kind of like, okay, well, this doesn't quite work. This thing that they're doing here doesn't quite work. But like, I get what they're going for, and I like some of the swings that they're taking, and then seeing, the choices that were made, whether it be period setting or location setting and stuff like that, it was so much more interesting to think about when watching this movie than it might be during a very obvious kind of studio movie.
Yeah, for sure. And to quote the immortal movie Mystery Men, they must have taken the Q out of Charles Band's dictionary, because he doesn't know the meaning of the word quit. And that is part of the appeal of that guy, is because he is constantly just going. It doesn't matter if he's losing his houses or losing all his money or like boom times, bust times. Like he has always just got his eye on whatever the next thing is. You know, he's one of those sharks that like can't stop moving or he'll die.
Well, you know, we mentioned 2024 as last like Charles Band movie, and I'd have to look for one that was directed by him. But if we're talking about him as a producer, like there's about 12 in production right now.
Yeah, at least, you know, and it's crazy like that. But the interesting thing about this movie is that this is representing him kind of stepping back behind the camera for a first time in a little while. So a little context for this movie. It's called Dr. Moreau's House of Pain. It was released January 2004, directed by Charles Band, written by C. Courtney Joyner, who used the pseudonym Earl Kenton as a reference to the writer of the original Island of Lost Souls screenplay. So gotta love a deep cut film nerd. This stars John Patrick Jordan, Jessica Lancaster, Peter Donald Badalamenti II. I got to get the whole name. That name's amazing. L'Oreal New, Ling Om, B.J. Smith, Deborah Mayer, and Jacob Whitkin. Now, this movie is a little bit of an anomaly for a couple reasons. This was the first proper time Charles Band stepped back behind the camera in a couple years. I think his last film before this was kind of a softcore porn called NoAngels.com, which came out about
it sure was
3 or 4 years before this, you know?
Yeah.
And in those 3 or 4 years, as we've covered oftentimes, so Brennan, like Full Moon goes through eras, you know, there's like, depending on kind of who's financing them. And from like 2000 to about 2003, they were in what we call the Tempe Films era or the Shadow Films era. And this is where Charles Band kind of handed over the reins to a couple of guys who J.R. Bookwalter and Devin Hamilton. And they just kind of like made their own kind of movies for even like a fraction of the typical Puppet Master budget, which is like digital cameras and just kind of like a lot of spit and baling wire. And they made movies that are really interesting and don't really feel like Full Moon as we've come to know it. This is where we get like kind of darker torture porny kind of stuff, slasher films. Like there's almost no tiny puppets or little homunculi running around biting people. There's almost none of that kind of Charles Band energy during that era. And it
not
ended
a ghoulie or a spooky or a critter in sight.
Barely a ghoulie.
Nope.
Nary a ghoulie do I spy. But yeah, so when this movie is being made, this is Charles Band kind of coming out of this rough period and sort of trying to take the reins again. And so as a bit of an anomaly, not only is this the first time that he stepped behind the camera in a couple of years, this is also the only time in his history since 1982 when he released only one film in a calendar year. This is the one and only film released for Full Moon Pictures in 2004. And that has not happened since Parasite in 1982 with Empire. It was more common back then, like you could have a gap year here and there. It was pretty much unheard of in Full Moon times. Would you get like 3, 4, 5 movies a year?
Well, I mean, if you're Dave Dakota, you're knocking 3, 4, 5 out in a month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he had an 11 movie string in a year. Yeah, or 2 years, something like that.
I think for this, though, I think how Charles Band, it's documented that Charles Band felt like this should be a return to quality over quantity. I believe it was put in the book with this movie. And, you know, in doing so, it makes sense then that he would go back to a collaboration with someone that you and I have both touted as one of the best writers of the entire Full Moon crop of people, C. Courtney Joyner.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you know, last week you heard us talk about Quadrant, which was C. Courtney Joyner's return to working with Charles Band again. We sort of did like a reverse bookend because this movie was the last time they worked together until for decades, seemingly until Quadrant. So it's kind of, you know, this is an interesting one for it to be in 2004, the last movie. Like, so for a long time, this was the demarcation time of like, this is the last movie that they did. And it's a really interesting to look at the production of this movie and to see how much Charles Band was really bringing into it, how much C. Courtney Joyner was bringing into it. I mean, we know, you know, as a guy who did Trancers, like we know he loves a noir and a neo-noir element to pop in there. And we know that when he gets to live in a period piece, he will.
Yeah.
Puppet Master 3 being one that takes place in the early 40s during World War II. And so the difference here, though, I mean, you talk about Puppet Master 3, which is a low budget movie, all full moon features were. This now, though, is something that he's now working on trying to create a period mood on even a fraction of that budget. So
Yeah,
Puppet Master
exactly.
3 was, I don't know the exact budget, but this was, very, very cheap, I'm sure, in only the 5 digits amount of money, and I think was completed in 1 week.
Yeah, but it was, there were at least an attempt at production values here. This is the first film in a while that they shot on film. This was shot on 35 millimeter. They'd been in a real kind of digital rut for a while, and early 2000s digital is fucking hard to look at. It is just, you can have all the great like filmmaking behind you as you want, but like it is tough to look at some of these like over the counter digital videos. Even like higher end professional stuff around this time looks kind of grainy and washed out, and like the color correction's all off, so it was a bit tough to look at. I think this one, this movie, I think more than anything else, I can tell you because we've already kind of recorded the month ahead of time, so I'll spoil this a little bit, but I think this is the movie that makes the best use of the noir format to the point where I can't really imagine watching this in color. Like, this must be really boring to look at in color, right?
So, Steve, I cannot tell you how glad I am that you said that, because I feel the complete opposite.
Interesting. Okay.
Not that I don't understand, and Brennan will give you a platform to weigh in here also, but not that I don't get where they were coming from. Like, I think it's a period piece based on the costuming and the dialogue. We're assuming it's about the 40s.
Yeah.
In terms of the vintage cars, they may not be anachronistically perfectly correct. I mean, that might have been a 50s car in there at one point, but not a big deal. But I get thematically, you've got some dames, you've got some broads,
Yeah.
you've got, like a boxer on the lam type guy. And that all makes sense. Not that I feel like this doesn't work in the noir. That's not quite what I'm getting at here. I think a case could be made for this one to be given in the noir presentation over, let's say, Skullheads and
Right.
some of the other ones that we've already talked about, but you'll hear those conversations in a few weeks. But I think there is a production design element to this movie that is kind of lost a little bit. There are times when the black and white works, like setting up the beginning scenes where they're at the bar, and he's watching the one character perform on stage.
Right.
That to me all works in black and white, but you would be surprised to see how much of the production of the design of this movie is actually pretty interesting in color.
Really?
Like, it made me think, because I watched it in both, and it made me think of how, take for example, like Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy movie.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that the colors in Dr. Moreau's House of Pain are as vibrant as they are in Dick Tracy.
They're going hard on that
one.
But
the thing is, like, Dick Tracy being, a 1950s set kind of hard-boiled detective thing as well, a stylistic choice that they could have made would have been to have that movie be in black and white. Obviously, it's being designed after the comic strips, and so they want that pop of colors. But I started to think about like how much the color kind of enhances that movie. And I actually think that's kind of what happens with this one in color too. Like, I watched it in black and white first, and my expectation was I'm going to put this on in color just because I want to see, but it's going to really pale in comparison.
All right, I'm curious to get Brennan. You watched this movie probably 6 or 7 times, I assume, in various formats and aspect ratios.
We really told you to be prepared.
You really wanted to soak in it. Yeah. What was your take on? Yeah, because we watched the same version. We watched the noir one. Did you feel like we were missing anything?
No. I guess I figured that the black and white was doing a lot to sort of disguise the low budget of a lot of the prosthetic monster effects and what I felt to be sort of relatively underdressed sets. Doesn't this film enter the rarefied air of movies shot in the director's home, or at least property?
It does.
Correct.
Yeah, this is the brief time when Charles Band, and we're going to talk about this later this month as well, but there's a brief time when Charles Band owned Harry Houdini's former estate in Los Angeles.
That's right.
And this is one of the 2 movies that he shot there. We'll cover the other one in a couple weeks here, but I think this one uses it better. This is the one that makes it feel in that other film, like it feels like a suburban home that could be in like bumfuck anywhere. This one actually feels like it has a little bit of old Hollywood glamour, which is sort of what you want. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off, Brian. What were you saying?
Well, I can't know what it looked like in color because I could only handle the majesty of this movie but the once. But I'll say that like I thought some of the gore effects almost reminded me a little bit in black and white of like Tetsuo the Iron Man. There was just something about the black and white 35 millimeter sort of an inky, gooey black anonymous gore, sort of anonymous meat matter in this movie that I think really worked in black and white, partially because the black and white obscures exactly what you're looking at when it comes to a lot of those surgery scenes, or as to what these pig men and what was the other guy? What even was he supposed to be?
Yeah, what even was? I think he's like a bear or something. He's just like a big guy,
like a warthog or something. Yeah,
it kind of helped Bebop or Rocksteady. I'm not sure which one.
yeah.
It gave it sort of a strange, dreamlike, anonymous quality where I was like trying to figure out exactly what I was looking at, which did help for me add to the atmosphere. So I do wonder if color would have almost made it too explicit what I was looking at.
This is one of the rare instances where, to what degree this movie works in any format, depends on who you are and what your mileage for this kind of stuff is.
Totally.
But I'm going to say this is kind of one of the rare instances where I feel like it kind of works in both, and for different reasons. Like you're 100% right. Like the anonymous, unidentifiable like meat still looks very much like black sludge in the color version as well.
Okay.
But the thing is, like you're totally right. Like the black and white, the strengths of the black and white version is that it does hide some of the low budget qualities of the movie. To me, what the movie is missing in the black and white version is there is a lot of, because this is a Mac Allberg shot movie.
Yeah.
There is a lot of actual like intentional lighting in this movie, and you wouldn't know it really watching the noir version, but in color, there are scenes where it's it'll be something as simple as having like the 2 characters of their names are escaping me for a second. Eric the boxer, Eric the Kid Carlson, and Judith, when they're talking, and behind them is like, I guess in the noir it almost looks like light from a grate or bars from like a jail cell sort of behind them, but in the color version those are sort of illuminated pink. And then there's a lot of like very brightly like greenly lit times when it's on some of the creatures, and then when it's the beginning, when it's Jessica Lancaster and John Patrick Jordan and Deborah Mayer together like in the car, their costuming and the lighting of the production design in that moment is like very bright. Like the red in her dress and hat pops, and like the green on his shirt pops, and it's very intentional. And I felt like it doesn't necessarily compare in terms of production design to like Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy or The Rocketeer or something that's kind of serialized like that where the colors really pop. But I thought it was a really like interesting artistic choices that actually work in the colorized version. And so when I was watching it, I was going, oh, wow, the way they lit this is cool. It's like there's this like green backing light, oh, this pink backing light, oh, there's red backing lights, things like that. And I think that those helped. It's weird because simultaneously they helped me experience the movie one way in color, but then the same shots, maybe some of the Mac Allberg like Dutch angles, also looked kind of cool in the black and white. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
not that I don't think it worked in the presentation. I feel like this one, as even though it might be a middle of the road movie, stylistically kind of is equal in my eyes in either presentation.
I think, yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear that. I just, because I was watching it and I just really felt like some of these shots and some of these lighting setups were kind of designed with a vintage like black and white in mind. And again, we should clarify here that like we're referring to noir in the sense of how these movies are branded. And just be making a movie black and white does not make it a noir, which is something we've been harping on for a lot of these episodes. But it does make it feel like it's a vintagey throwback, because this is kind of meant to be that. Now, we should talk about the source material a little bit for those not familiar. It's based on The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is a novella by H.G. Wells from 1896, a very, very important like early science fiction story about, you know, men interfering with the whims of evolution to create a more perfect species. That's kind of the early idea of it. The story has been adapted multiple times. I think the best is probably the 1932 Island of Lost Souls with Charles Lawton and Bela Lugosi, like the classiest, like kind of coolest version if you want to see it. The most fascinating version, obviously, is 1996's adaptation, The Island of Dr. Moreau, the Richard Stanley film with Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer and David Thewlis, a top to bottom bonkers movie that is a far more interesting behind the scenes story than it is an actual final product. Watch the documentary, The Island of Lost Souls. Is that what it's called? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those movies where the behind the scenes documentary in this case, very much superior to the actual movie that it's based on. There are more controversial examples I could give. Like, I prefer Burden of Dreams to Fitzcarraldo. Les Blank's
or
behind the scenes making of
Hearts of Darkness before Apocalypse Now is a classic example.
Yeah, that's another spicier take for sure. Although I am amenable to that. But the behind the scenes of that adaptation is great, because they even brought in John Frankenheimer, one of my favorite directors, to finish it. And you wouldn't know, you know,
he's the one who gets stuck with the credit on it, right? Like Richard Stanley gets his name taken off of it. Yeah. And I mean, it's a fascinating movie if, like me, you are obsessed with the idea of like movie star ego excess. Like, Marlon Brando is kind of the pinnacle of that example. Like, the amount of shit that people let that man get away with because he was interesting to look at on film was bizarre to me, and something that I think doesn't happen anymore or couldn't happen anymore. But like, I feel like you reach a threshold of like being too difficult, too much of an asshole, too much of a weirdo, that they don't let you just completely sabotage an expensive film production like that anymore. You know, and Val Kilmer was going through a nasty divorce, and he was depressed, and he was just stoned all the time and didn't want to be doing the movie. And so he was supposed to be like the heroic lead character, and he asked to be downgraded to like the weird junkie minion. And David Thewlis was brought in to be the lead, which is like a very different type than Val Kilmer, like a very, very different type. I love David Thewlis, but very different type. And mostly that movie's going to be noteworthy. I think the biggest imprint that movie has on the culture is being the inspiration for Mini-Me, right? Like, that is directly where the character of Mini-Me comes from, because Marlon Brando became obsessed with this, I believe he's a Filipino actor who was the world's shortest man. And he just kind of insisted on having him be in every scene with him. And then he would do some other weird shit, like he would put an ice bucket on his head, and like he was trying to imply that like Dr. Moreau had a blowhole or something. He was trying to get fired. Bizarre. He was trying to get fired, and instead he got Richard Stanley fired, and Richard Stanley had to sneak onto the set dressed like a cat person so that he could try and monitor what was going on with his movie. Truly one of the most cursed films ever. And I think it kind of killed a lot of this franchise, or not this is a franchise, but it killed adaptations of this movie.
I remember seeing that movie in the theater with my dad and my mom's cousin, and you know, I was young enough where, you know how you can remember when you get to a discerning age where you're like, oh wait, not all movies are good.
Yeah.
Like, when you're a kid, you just accept at face value that a movie's a movie and they're all equal in your eyes.
It's an
But I was like
important learning
15 or
experience to get exposed to
yeah,
your
I
first
was
movie
like,
where you walk out going like, oh no, what, how, that was that
yeah,
bad? How could that be bad? It's a
I
movie.
I feel like that had happened before, but with this one, it was like I was in the theater and I remember being like, oh, this is a pretty bad movie. And then just my father and my mom's cousin laughing the entire time. Like it was just me looking at the two of them. I'm like, 15 years old or whatever, and they're just having the time of their lives laughing at every absurd scene. And I do want to give a quick plug to some friends of the show for an episode that they did. So Eric Hansen, Cradle to the Grave podcast, who we collaborate with a bunch of times, me and Steve, did an episode on the island of Dr. Moreau from, I'm going to say, maybe like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago. And his guest was Kaylee from Once Over with Kaylee, who also is a friend of the show. But he had Richard Stanley come on that episode and then talk
really?
about the experience of it. Yeah. And
I
it's
missed
pretty
this. I have to
incredible.
catch that one.
Yeah. So I would definitely say anyone interested in hearing some behind the scenes straight from the mouth of Richard Stanley about that movie, definitely check that out.
All of that table setting was just an opportunity to talk about this movie because I don't think we'll get the chance to do so. And Dr. Moreau's House of Pain itself doesn't have a whole lot of meat on its bones in terms of like plot things to dissect and discuss. It's kind of sort of a sequel. Or at least a spiritual sequel, or just like a readaptation. Like there's no longer an island. Now Dr. Moreau works out of what looks like a composited factory that was like imposed over the Hollywood Hills or something. And like you never see anybody using a door. You see them like walking out from behind it in a way that seems very conspicuous. And it's it's leaning like C. Courtney Joyner loves a trope, and he's really well versed in them, and he really knows how to kind of wield them effectively. And so he's using a lot of like classic 1940s tropes. You mentioned like the down on his luck boxer, and we have like the fast talking career gal journalist, and we've got like the world weary damsel in distress, and all of these kind of tropes are coming across. I want to start by talking about John Patrick Jordan, who is our lead here. You pointed out, Jared, I did not put it together that he is also one of the leads of Evil Bong, which I just did not. I did not connect that. This is...
Well, you know why, Steve? Because there was not somebody next to him for the duration of his scenes going, monkey.
Oh, God damn it. Oh, every time I forget about monkey and them trying to make that into a catchphrase. It stings every time. But I will say this must be the most baby-faced, like angelically soft-skinned professional boxer that I've ever seen in my life. That is a man who, like, I would have a hard time believing that man had a sunburn, much less like won boxing matches or took a punch to the face.
You're totally right. Noirs love boxers, and like if you've ever seen the real-time movie The Setup, which is with Robert Ryan, who is essentially the opposite. He's like a sentient piece of sandpaper.
Exactly.
Like, that's the kind of guy that you want for something like that. Yeah, it is a little hard to believe, especially since he's in the beginning of the movie, he's kind of nursing like bruises on his face, and he's sort of responding to them as if he's never gotten one before.
Right.
So what's happened to my beautiful face?
Right. Yeah. Like if he's a down on his luck prize fighter, like he's brand new at it. And so we establish these characters. They have to kind of wander into this mysterious secret evil lab for reasons unbeknownst to most anybody. And then they run afoul of these little creatures that he creates, namely Gallagher, who's kind of like the main little antagonist. And this is Peter Badalamenti II, who was an actor I recognized from his voice for a single episode of 30 Rock, which means I've probably seen too many episodes of 30 Rock. But he's the guy who Jenna and Will Forte pay to come in and sit on them. Who wants to get sat on? Like I recognized his voice immediately from that, which is just
amazing,
absurd. But yeah, and then it's just kind of a lot of like most Charles Band directed films, it's a lot of exposition. He really loves his kind of like overwrought dialogue and these kind of long scenes of back and forth between characters, and like not a whole lot of action.
Not a whole lot of freaks.
Not a whole lot of freaks. A very limited.
I'll cop to being disappointed by the number of mutants and monsters in the. I mean, there's only two really. I mean, there's the Catwoman, but as in most adaptations of this story, she's like basically like a beautiful woman with long fingernails, you know?
Yeah.
And so then you've got the Pig Man, and you've got the Bear Man, and then you have the sort of the Fish Woman, and you know, at least the '90s one really gave you a smorgasbord of various mutated creatures.
Oh yeah.
So I'll cop to wishing that there was more, you know, lost souls on the on the island of lost souls in this one.
Yeah, the fun part about that is the the sheer variety, you know, like, and I don't think any film adaptation has ever gotten this exactly right. Like the idea is that they are merged with animals in ways to like make them so like, but in the Richard Stanley version, that kind of just equates to like, oh, this is a pretty high-end production of cats. That's kind of what we're looking at. These are clearly human beings with these suits on them. I really like the idea that kind of is introduced in the original novella is that there are a lot of failed experiments. There are a lot of ones that like maybe it half took, or like maybe they're hodgepodges in ways that like.
I was laughing, watch exactly what you're saying, Steve, about how the failed experiment, because there is a little bit of that when Dr. Moreau is giving one of his monologues about what it's like to play God. And I was kind of getting vibes of like no, it's easy. Look, I've been practicing. I made a pigeon rat.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. It's a lot of that. I think the designs in this come a little bit closer to that idea because like the Gallagher is clearly like derived from a pig, but like it's not like one-to-one, and some of that's just kind of the mask work isn't there, and it might also be kind of why the big guy is a little indistinct as to like what species he is, what he is. But like the fish girl makes a pretty good example of like, oh yeah, this is an example of it like not fully taking, you know, this is one of the poor bastards who like didn't get stuck with any kind of like enhanced supernatural abilities. They're just kind of like really messed up.
Yeah, and her makeup was probably like my favorite. Her prosthetics were probably my favorite in the film because she has this sort of like misplaced, almost scar-like gill that's like over her mouth and cheek, and it kind of like pulses and flaps a little bit in a way that was very unnerving to me, and definitely my favorite piece of like special effects in the movie was the fish lady.
Yeah, and you know, obviously the centerpiece monster or whatever you want to call it does not look like a monster at all. It's played by L'Oreal New, and she is Aliana, who, like, I think we clocked pretty early on that she was derived from some kind of cat. Like she had some feline tendencies or something, and it was just a very successful transplant, and she didn't look, you know, like a cat monster, but she was playing it like that from the get-go. An early clue I got is in her opening scenes when she punched a hole in a man's face, which was then never really remarked upon again that she could do that. But apparently she can do that. And she
that was Billy Zane in Demon Knight has someone.
I was about to say right out of Demon Knight.
I mean, I think today is the day I'm going to rewatch Demon Knight, and Ailish hasn't watched it yet, and we are both sick and feverish. That movie super rules, and I think having like a low-grade fever and a cold is a good way to watch that movie.
Oh yeah.
Well,
if I may, I just want to say about that performance, like what I like, I mean, and granted, again, this is because of budget, because of time constraints and all of those things. You don't really have the money to convincingly have some kind of leopard transformation.
No.
So she has to play it with, I don't want to use the word nuance. Nuance isn't exactly a word of how anything really can be played in this kind of production.
Yeah.
But it did harken back a little bit to like movies I really love, like the old Val Lewton movies. And so you think of Cat People, the second one, the Leopard Man, I Walked with a Zombie, Seventh Victim, all of those, where one of the strengths of those movies, particularly that first Jacques Tourneur Cat People, is, you know, it's never really, it's not so much concerned with a transformation the way, let's say, like the Paul Schrader one is.
Right.
And it's more just like, things happening in the shadows and suggestion. And so I thought that the performance understood that and was played in sort of a dated kind of way, but on purpose, like to its betterment. I think I kind of quite liked this performance in this movie, and I also we've been saying how we find Deborah Mayer generally to be pretty delightful in this movie. And I think she's having a lot of fun with the period dialogue in the beginning. That was the thing, is once we get to the House of Pain itself with these creatures, I check out slightly. I think my favorite stuff in this movie is the characters talking and living in the period world that C. Courtney Joyner and Charles Band kind of created in this movie. And I think the beginning scenes with Marianne and with I'm always forget I don't want to call him Larnell because I would be doing him a disservice.
Eric,
Judith and Eric and and Marianne's scenes in the beginning. I think there's a really good energy to them, and that's Deborah Mayer, who I think we've sort of established now gives 110% to
she's
all
always
productions.
Yeah, she's always fun anytime she shows up in these. But yeah, L'Oreal New is really interesting. I was looking at her career, like most of her, you know, she's been a model and she's done a lot of other things, but most of her career was working as a body double and stand-in for Michelle Pfeiffer, which is good work if you can get it, you know. And then she kind of like spun off from there. But literally, like Brennan and I were talking about Cat People like a lot watching this movie, because it's like it's clearly drawing on a little bit of that. But Cat People, the first one, is so subversive and like slyly sexual and like really kind of like going for something. And then Curse of the Cat People, which I think is wonderful, is basically kind of like E.T. almost. Like it becomes like this heartwarming like tale of like a lost woman connecting with a child, and it has basically no relation whatsoever to the Cat People franchise, but it's so good.
I know, and I had a weird moment where I couldn't remember the title of that one, and I don't know why. I was like picturing the poster in my brain, and I'm just like,
Curse
the
of
second
the
one.
I think it's Curse of,
Yes.
I will say this movie is inspired by the Paul Schrader Cat People in one regard, which is that it does endeavor to keep our cat lady as naked as possible throughout the duration of the runtime.
Endeavoring, and I would say succeeding. Yeah, I think they hit the nail on the head with that one. You know, she's bearing the brunt of the TNA element of this movie, which is never like a super rewarding role to have to do, but she leans right the hell into it and seems to be having a lot of fun. It looks like in the back half of her career, she's worked with a lot of with a friend of the show, Sam Irving, you know, on these kind of like supernatural, like queer coded shows where she gets to kind of be really big and campy. And so seems like she's kind of really been embraced by the gay community and is, I think, giving a big burlesque performance here that I found to be a lot of fun.
It's always a relief when you see an actress in one of these movies who looks sort of like confident and intentional about the way they're like nude on screen, because in a lot of these cheapo B horror films you do see a lot of actresses in the nude where you're like, oh man, I feel like a lot of arm twisting had to happen to get this on screen, and that is not the case here. She seems like very gung-ho and very confident, and she definitely sells all of her scenes.
Yeah, Brennan, you mentioned Head of the Family before, and like we spent a lot of time in our episode, which came out a couple weeks ago on that movie, kind of saying the same thing about Jacqueline Lavelle and how it's just, she's so like confident in those scenes that you can tell, even though what's being done to her in the movie is kind of gross, it's like you can tell she's 100% game.
Yeah, she's in on the joke. She's
in on the gag. Yeah.
She's fully in control of how she's being like presented, and I think you do get an element of that with L'Oreal New in this one as well, you know. And then of course another Evil Bong holdover would be Jacob Whitkin playing the titular Dr. Moreau, who just one of those like really esteemed kind of long running character actors who's been in 100 million things. We were looking this up. He died in 2016, so his last movie was either Evil Bong High Five or the Coen brothers' Hail Caesar. So I don't know which one got out first, but technically one of those is going to be his last film. And that really kind of says it all. That runs the gamut right there.
That's a real actor's actor right there. You know, the
100%.
hand goes out, the paycheck goes in, and then the acting comes out. You know, that is the job of an actor. In Evil Bong, kind of 666, or in Hail Caesar, either one.
And he's kind of that like David Warner echelon, where it's like, oh, clearly this is like a real thespian who's like had training and has experience and all of that. But he's also in no way balking at this material. You don't feel like he's backstage going like, oh, but I was King Lear. You know, you don't sense that kind of like bitterness or whatever. He's not like Alan Rickman in Galaxy Quest. He's fully like owning being kind of this genre ham in a fun way, you know. So,
and he does have to chew through a lot of what ends up being kind of repetitive dialogue, where it does feel like you were saying, the opening of this film is maybe the most exciting, even though there's no monster action, because it is, I think, generating that noirish sense of like mystery and anticipation. And it's got these characters that have that classic noir disposition where they're just smart enough to get into trouble and not smart enough to get themselves out of it. But once we actually get into the House of Pain, it's a lot of the Pig Man and Dr. Moreau sort of explaining the concept of the movie to our lead characters, kind of over and over again. And it's, you know, it's pretty simple stuff. It's he's mixing up humans and animals. You know, I think I basically covered it just then. But there's a lot. He really gets into the weeds. I believe you mentioned the phrase seminal chamber earlier on, which really did
that was
me.
trotted out.
They really get into the weeds on how the creatures are produced in a way where I'm like, well, this screen real estate could have been used for some more exciting stuff. But that is something I've noticed about Charles Band movies, is they do put a high premium on like kind of flowery dialogue, which I do think is kind of distinctive for this kind of movie.
No, absolutely. And it in a way, like knowing that this game came out, or that this movie came out when it did, and being like the only movie that they released this year, and then them having the kind of this big reset in 2005 is when we get both Ginger Dead Man and Evil Bong. All right. And those are both going to be big hits that redefine kind of what Full Moon is for the next like decade plus. And then, you know, they're kind of refinding their footing now, like by trying to do edgier stuff again and trying to drift away from like kind of the broad stoner comedy sort of thing. But like, this is one of the last gasps at what Full Moon was trying to be with the Paramount era, like back when they were first starting. It feels like a little high-minded, not like so high-minded that it's going to be distracting, but like they're trying for a literary adaptation. They're trying for a genre pastiche. They're trying for maybe just a modicum of class, you know, which is something that always kind of separated Charles Band from somebody like Lloyd Kaufman, who is a craftsman and is really good at what he does, but he is a lot more interested in pushing buttons and being kind of big and cartoonish and sort of punk rocky in your face. Whereas Charles Band always saw himself kind of as a filmmaker. And I think this is kind of the last gasp that we get of that before we enter the Evil Bong phase. That is, I'm grateful for it because it keeps the company alive and keeps our show going. But it was, if you were a fan of this kind of stuff, this kind of like B-movie era stuff from there, then you're not really getting that with those. Which was a very long
would agree with that. No, that's fine. And, you know, I realized our Head of the Family episode came out a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking about the recording session of that episode recently, and I was remembering how I feel like there's a good 10 straight minutes of that, which is kind of me on a soapbox. And so feel like, you know, go ahead and rant away on something like this, because I feel like I was feeling in the moment of recording that episode, I guess a little bit sanctimonious. And so I feel like I talked a lot in that episode about not only why we love that movie, but kind of in defense of how it's not a movie for everyone, but it's a movie that knows what it is in way more words than I probably needed to say that.
I will also
You were holding
clarify,
court,
like,
almost like a head of the family.
they're like a real
I
Byron
was.
Stackpool type. No, and all of that is to say, like, this is not top tier Full Moon for me. This is a pretty mediocre release, but I always appreciate it when they try something, when they have a little bit of when they get a little bit on their high horse and they try and do something weird and literary and strange. And I appreciate what this movie's going for more than I actually like it or will probably want to watch it again. But it's a nice kind of little last gasp at the past.
Yeah, I was a little
here's a
less
flaw
interested.
here's a flaw
go
that
ahead,
I
Brennan.
think here's a flaw that I think it shares with all of the other adaptations of this story on film. I don't know if any movie has cracked this yet, which is I'm never totally convinced at any point of the potential of Dr. Moreau's plan. You know, I feel like for the absolute best sci-fi stories to work, you have to sort of see where the guy who invented the torment nexus was coming from when he invented it, so that you can be like, what tangled webs we weave, you know, the monkey's paw curls. How could he have known the torment nexus would result in so much torment, you know?
Right.
But for Dr. Moreau, in all of these versions of the story, he's always like, yes, my evil plan was to mix human and animal DNA, and each time it produces a grotesque and violent monstrosity. And I'm like, yeah, man, you think maybe you're just you got tunnel vision on this thing, and maybe you need to like step back and reassess. I'm never convinced of his ambition, and not in this one, and not honestly not in the other two that I've seen, the 30s or the 90s one.
This kind of made me think of another early parody of this that kind of nailed the idea of what you're talking about is South Park. Like South Park in the very first season had a character that was based on Marlon Brando in Dr. Moreau. And his whole thing was that he would go to a secret lab and he was sewing more asses onto animals. And that's kind of what's happening here. And he's convinced this is going to change the world. This is going to be the new master race. Look at this. It's a monkey with 7 asses. And that's kind of what we have with these movies. I think you're exactly right. It's like, I don't understand why a human with some cat DNA is the ideal form of evolution. Like, I don't yeah, you could maybe convince me to get a turtle shell, you know, that would protect me from attacks from the rear. But otherwise, like, I don't really see the logic of this plan.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jake.
Well, no, it's funny because there's and he's very purposeful too, in the way, like, I don't know if there's a criteria for what kind of people they're supposed to bring back to the house. I know they're supposed to get a woman because unfortunately the man whose head gets punched through, I mean, maybe his head was just soft because his whole body was full of yellow fever.
Yeah, like you know, they all had it. Yeah, they didn't have Jonas Salk hadn't been doing his thing yet, or Louis Pasteur. Fuck, I fucked that up. Oh my god, I'm sick, everybody. I know the difference between Pasteur and Jonas Salk. Come on. What kind of show do you think we are here?
Yeah, I found myself being less interested well, if I'm gonna be completely honest, I could tell you I don't ever want to say checked out. I wouldn't say that I was checked out necessarily of this movie at any point, but the moment when I was kind of like, like, I don't know that I'm as interested anymore is the minute that they killed off Deborah Mayer.
Yeah, which was early.
Yeah, way too early for me. And 20 minutes into this movie, and this is a short movie. It's another one of those, 65 minutes and then an 8-minute protracted, very slow credit sequence.
We were talking about that. Like, every movie needs to end with like a Predator style turn to the camera and smile and give your thumbs up and get your title card. Like, I want that for every movie.
Well, I want that for every movie because thematically and like mood wise, you can have so much fun with it. Like, all of those, like the one from Predator and all those other ones too, can then just be superimposed over literally any 80s theme song. And it looks and sounds amazing. It's like, I would love to see, the end credits to Dr. Moreau's House of Pain, except, with like the theme song to Perfect Strangers playing over it instead. Because that's yeah. I mean, we all know that one is a banger.
Is that the best TV theme song of all time? It's kind of up there for me.
In my opinion, it is.
Between that and Greatest American Hero, yeah.
so you have two subsets of the TV theme song
Mhm.
from the 80s. You have the Jesse Fredericks, which are the ones that all kind of sound the same: Full House, Family Matters, Perfect Strangers, but Perfect Strangers being the top tier, I think, of those ones. I think the Full House and Family Matters ones sound too similar to one another.
Yeah, neither of those are
But
very at quite as sticky in that like soft rock Seals and Crofts kind of way that those other songs work. Like you could absolutely blast like the Perfect Strangers theme as yacht rock. But of course I'm
no,
forgetting
the other
greatest.
other two are just like a summer breeze,
Yeah,
like you
they are.
said.
They make me feel fun.
The other the other ones though that come to mind for me are the Gary Portnoys. So you've got your Cheers theme song, which is up
Oh,
there
sure.
in top 5, and then Gary Portnoy also did another theme song which is often overlooked, which I think is among the best of that time period, which is Punky Brewster.
You know, I've seen exactly one episode of Punky Brewster, and it's the one where the kid gets trapped in the refrigerator and almost suffocates.
I mean, if there's one to see,
If there's the
that's
one
like
to
the
see, yeah.
veriest specialist episode of Punky Brewster that existed. But then you also have whatchamacallit, like the ones where you have sitcom actors singing songs. So I mean,
Family Ties,
wrote
yeah.
well,
Growing Pains, yeah.
Alan Thicke wrote the theme song to Facts of Life.
Oh, that's right,
But
he
it wasn't.
did.
No. See, Growing Pains, even though Alan Thicke was in Growing Pains was B.J. Thomas and someone to As Long as We Got Each Other. I forget who he duetted with,
Show
but
me that
Alan
smile
Thicke.
again.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah,
Alan Thicke sang the theme song to Different Strokes,
that's it.
and
Okay.
he wrote the theme song to Facts of Life, which is performed by someone else. And then, but there's a weird thing of like people singing their own songs too, which is when maybe the weirdest one is, I think it's like it's not Bill Kirkenbauer singing the theme song to Just the 10 of Us to his own show. Maybe it is. I don't know. We have completely gone off the rails now.
I think I was
This is
going
one
to
of
say
those
that
patented tangents I've heard tell of.
I told you they are welcome. If you have thoughts on 80s TV theme songs, or apparently I had no idea you had this deep reservoir of like knowing the composers of these.
The saddest part of all of this is that I did not open a website or a book to look at for any of
We
this
can
information.
attest to that. This was coming right off the dome, and I understand and respect that. But I also think that if we're spending this much time on 80s TV theme songs, it might mean we run out of things to say about Dr. Moreau's House of Pain. Which I think means we can conclude this discussion. But we want to thank Brennan Patrick for being here. Thank you so much, dude, for jumping in on this one. I had a blast watching it with you. I had a blast talking about it with you.
Yeah, this was a total pleasure.
Do you have anything coming up to promote, anything to plug, anything like that?
No. Just plugging away here in Austin, having a good time. I'm very happy to start getting back to my regular deranged movie watching habits, which have kind of been put on hold from being in a couple shows back to back.
Yeah. Well, by the time you hear this episode, we will know if we can say award-winning actor Brennan Patrick nominated for the local theater award, the Be Eyed in Pain, for a performance in Betrayal. Very proud of you. Very excited for that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it to the awards yet, but we'll coordinate that later.
I'll bully you off about it.
Yeah, I might have to try to. But yes, so very excited to have you here, and we'll have to have you back, hopefully, for a better film. They are still out there. We are still finding them from time to time.
Well, you know what? In fairness, no, I echo the sentiment, Brennan. This was a delight talking to you about this movie. I will say, in terms of like final thoughts of the movie, though, we didn't really talk about the very final scene, but I did think that Judith dancing with like the serpent tongue coming out actually looked cool.
That was a little funny.
Yeah.
Don't know how earned it was, but yeah, I'm glad it was
there. It made me smile as the last little bit before it cut to the very sitcom-y ending for the credits. But like what I kept thinking of, and I had the same feeling that the two of you probably had, which was after I finished watching it in black and white, I was like, I had the time, so I said, I'm going to watch this again. It's short, and I want to see in color. But I had the same feeling you guys had, which is probably that I was going to be like, oof, wow, yeah, this one doesn't work in color. The black and white kind of saved it. And then that wasn't really the experience I had. And the way that I think of it is like, there was a period of time I don't know, maybe 15, 18 years ago, when I was first really getting into film noir, and it almost for like a couple of months supplanted horror as like my number one genre, where it's like I'm just watching this, and this. And then I was redecorating an apartment and I wanted some like movie art. And so I went with some noir posters. And one of the posters that I got that I framed and hung up in my old apartment was for the 1953 Fritz Lang movie, The Big Heat, starring Glenn Ford and Gloria Graham. Now that's a movie is in black and white. The poster though was this beautifully painted, like bright blues, bright yellows, bright reds, really vibrant painting for the movie. And I remember watching the movie and being like, okay, this is kind of a quintessential noir. All the elements are here. Love the fact that it was made in black and white. Then I would look at the poster and be like, the color in the poster is so great. It doesn't match the vibes of the film itself. It's more like, I think when you were relegated to shooting movies primarily in black and white, one of the biggest things you want to do while advertising is have your ads be in color, because you didn't do that in the movie and you want them to be attention grabbing.
Right.
But I was like, I really love these kind of big primary colors that are in this poster. And that was sort of how I felt watching the color version. Like I love the fact that we were able to watch something billed as a noir in black and white, but then I was thinking of something like Cast a Deadly Spell, which is like a in 90s noir set in the 40s period piece or early 50s and in color.
Yeah.
And I thought they were able to make these cool like little artistic choices with the color that were surprisingly more effective than I expected. So that was maybe because I watched it that way second, it's like I'm bringing that more freshly with me into it. And I just remember being really surprised, thinking that I was going to be like, okay, this is something that was made incredibly cheaply and in color. It's probably getting breathed completely new life with this black and white treatment, and we'll get to see things in more of an intentionality. And now I don't necessarily feel that way. And I said it before, this is a middle of the road property, which kind of works.
Yeah.
Again, the Beekler designs for the monsters. It's always nice to see a Beekler even this late in his career.
Yeah.
But it kind of works in both presentations. So I'm going to say if somebody was deciding that they wanted to watch this movie, I'm not going to tell them one way or the other to choose either the black and white or color. I think they're sort of equally effective if this movie is effective at all. I do want to shout out that I love the idea behind the opening credits. Doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Except for the color version, I think benefited from when the last frame, after it says directed by Charles Band, zooms in, it then cuts from the black and white, like archival footage. It like fades into color, which I thought was a little more effective than it just continuing to be black and white. But the one weird knock against the color version is that it never leaves the aspect ratio of that frame.
Right.
So for the black and white one, stretches out more widescreen, and the color one stays. It's like the frame is maybe like, I don't want to say a 4:3, but not the whole screen.
Yeah.
And it stays in that aspect ratio. But I think, you know what, you can do worse. You can certainly, we've covered things that are better, but you could do worse. And I think if you watch the color or black and white one, you may enjoy this one. If you enjoy the show that we do every single week, watching these movies and talking about them, devoting, an hour plus to movies that most podcasts wouldn't touch, then, we appreciate you being here first and foremost. You can let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast device you're using to listen to this, and maybe a little review if you feel so inclined to do so. If you want to keep up with what we're doing kind of on the daily or weekly, the best way to do that is Instagram, puppetmasters_castle freaks. You can also follow me at _Giallo_Jared. The audio versions of the show are on YouTube, and there might be some posting on Blue Sky or Threads or things like that, but not too concerned about that. You can just communicate directly to us via Spotify comments or email, puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. But it's not the only show that Steve would like to take a moment to plug. So, Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, I also host a show called Cinema Arcade. That is cinema and arcade mashed together. That is what we do over there. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies to see how they contrast, compare, detract from each other, everything like that. If you want to go back a couple weeks, you could hear our guest this week, Brennan, talking about the movie Miami Vice from 2006. We had a good time digging into that one. Or you can hear a recently released episode featuring Jared talking about Halloween. Unsurprisingly, our longest episode ever. Or you can tune in this month because we've got a really weird selection coming up this month, including things like The Dark Crystal, Pacific Rim, The Emperor's New Groove, and I got to watch, because of the show, for the first time ever, Bruce Willis's Hudson Hawk, a movie I had never actually knew what was about. Let me tell you, I still am not totally certain if I know what that movie's about, but I think I love it. But we'll talk about it as we get into that show, because that is one of the weirdest movies I've seen in a while. So definitely check that out. And be sure to check us out next week, because the Noir-vember hits keep it coming. We're going to be talking about the 2009 film Skullheads, one of the films that brings Charles Band back to a weird Italian castle, some more tiny little homunculi, and a really good showcase for Robin Sidney, friend of the show. And we get to talk to the great Diana Goodman, who's one of our faves. We love to podcast with her. And yeah, we have a great time. We tricked her into watching a scary movie, but although scary is in heavy air quotes on that one.
Well, thank you again to Brennan for taking the time to enjoy this recording time with us and these the very weird movies. I always feel, like I don't know if I should be apologizing to people when who are not really initiated in all this full moon stuff. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say he had a good time as well. And thank you to everyone who's listening. And we will see you next week for Skullheads.